Open our meeting with a karakia, even though people are not at the table. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Welcome everyone to today's Kōrau Tōtōpū, the Long-Term Plan Finance and Performance Committee meeting. Please let me or Letitia know if you intend to leave the meeting. We will have morning tea and we do have lunch planned for today, as there are a few significant items on the agenda, but we don't consider it a target to get to past lunchtime. We will start with apologies. I have apologies for lateness from Councillor Brown and from Councillor Randall. Are there any other apologies? Right, I will move that we accept those, and Councillor Rogers will second. Ka whakapuaki au, kua mana te motini. I declare the motion carried. Are there any conflict of interest declarations? There appear to be none. I'll move on to confirmation of the minutes of our meeting held on, I should put my glasses on, this is going to be a disaster if I don't, 26th of September 2024. I could have come out with some random date without my glasses. Mawai e tautoko, Councillor Free, thank you. And I will move the motion to accept those minutes. We might get Councillor Abdurrahman's remote so he can vote. Thank you, team. We're just voting on the minutes, Councillor. Great. Ka whakapuaki au, kua mana te motini. I declare the motion carried. There are no items on the agenda and there is no public participation. In accordance with Standing Order 19.1, I will reorder the agenda to be considered as follows, and it's basically to bring the committee report of the Audit and Risk Committee forward because we have our auditor online, and so we thought we would do that item first. Welcome, Karen, if you're there. So we will... Who's coming up? Elizabeth. So we're moving to item 3.1, which is a report of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting of 22nd of October. Oh, and Karina, no mai. Please, over to you to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the annual report received through your papers last week is substantially the report, just there's a few minor editorial changes that have happened between now and then. The summary report document was also provided to you as well. The audit opinion is substantially complete. We will receive the the actual letter of rep and final opinion after this committee meeting before council for adoption on Thursday. And we'd just like to, there's just three audit points that you probably want to be across. So the emphasis of matter on the uncertainty over the three waters unit rates. So all Wellington Water shareholder councils will receive that also. And the qualification for complaints on water service performance. Again, that's for all Wellington Water shareholder councils. And then thirdly, the qualification on Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. This is because we're not reporting these Scope 3 in this report, but it will come through the Te Atakura annual report, which will be received in November, next month. And we have Karen Young, our auditor, online.
Can I just note that, sorry, just a correction, the emphasis of matter on the Wellington Water unit rates will only be on those Wellington Water shareholder councils that have had a valuation this year. So that's 3 councils in total. One is excluded from that.
Etc. Yeah. So, yeah, any questions?
Okay, do you want to do, is Karen going to speak as well? Should we have Karen speak and then have questions for everybody? Is that... No, my Karen, sorry to hear you're not feeling well.
It's okay, yeah.
Over
Thank
to
you, Chair.
Oh, you look good though.
Thank you.
Over to you if there's any remarks you'd like to make.
Okay, I thought that was a very good summary by Elizabeth and clarification from Andrea. I just wanted to also say the qualification of the greenhouse gas is in relation to the comparative for Scope 3, because Scope 3 isn't being reported this year in the annual report. The final wording of the opinions just being currently worked on. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Free.
Thank you. This is for Andrea, but thank you very much, Andrea, for your clarification about the councils in the Wellington Water family that are subject to this matter of emphasis. What significance was it having the revaluation? Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So when a revaluation cycle comes up, the valuation or the valuer that is undertaking the valuation looks at the unit rates. And so they've gone into Wellington Water. They've done some very detailed testing and looked at the cost of, in effect, replacing our assets. And they've deemed those costs based on the actual, they've deemed those unit rates based on the actual cost that it is being incurred. Audit New Zealand have a substantive database, and that includes, I think, approximately 46 councils. Karen will correct me if I'm wrong. This is just from the description that Karen has given us. And the unit rates that we are paying, or Wellington Water is incurring, is significantly higher than other councils. And so, in effect, the emphasis of matter is drawing attention to that fact, because that is not a sustainable position in the long term, where the Wellington councils, are paying much higher rates to upgrade and renew their infrastructure compared with the rates that the rest of the country are preparing. There will always be anomalies that take place because of geographic reasons, contractor availability, but it does seem to be out of step. So we are aware through conversations and information that we have seen that Wellington Water are aware of this issue, and the Chief Executive of Wellington Water has acknowledged that and is looking at the newly appointed Chief Executive, their procurement, etc., and is looking into that. He hasn't communicated that formally and directly with us, but I have certainly had a side conversation with him on that, and he's looking at it.
Thank you. That's very useful information. Thank you.
Councillor Abdirahman.
Please let me know if this is not related, Andrea. My question is regards to the water meter and how we currently paying for it, and how we currently paying for the maintenance of the infrastructure. But if we decide to go ahead with the water meter, what that looks like, when is the right time, if anyone opposes that decision, to bring it on?
So that's not a question for the annual report, but I will answer it because that is part of the, there will be a decision that is brought to council. So under the current LTP, what we are looking at doing is a business case for whether or not we should incorporate water meters. So Wellington Water is undertaking that work as part of the current LTP. Once that work has been done, that that paper, well, there will be a paper that comes back to you to make a decision on whether or not water meters should or shouldn't be rolled out. And then that won't necessarily be a decision about how you fund water. Yeah, you know, so there's two separate decisions. One is a decision on whether or not you have water meters, and that's to track and have a good record of the use of water. How we fund water doesn't necessarily need to be tied up in that decision. You can make a separate decision on funding of water, whether it's by volumetric charging through meters or through the current targeted rates that we currently apply. I hope that answers your question.
There appear to be no more questions. Thank you, Karen. And, oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
There is one more.
Yeah, may not be for Karen though, but just generally through the report, it tends to keep talking about the increase of costs due to climate impact and Gabrielle. Is there any, what is the general thinking on will these costs stabilise or will there continue to be increased costs going forward?
I can probably answer that one as well. I think as we experience shocks throughout the country, we will always see peaks in costs occurring, and that is related to matters such as, you know, bringing in contractors to undertake the work, etc., etc. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I could. But if I was providing advice on this matter to you, I would reflect on the fact that these events are becoming more common. They're becoming, you know, greater in their impact. And I think we need to be thinking about that as we manage our finances going forward.
Are there? I'm looking. No more questions. All right, thank you. This time, really, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Karina. And
Thank you.
Councillor Panovich is going to move the paper. And do you have a seconder, John?
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Panovich is going to second.
Great combination. Yeah, we've come around again to another time with an annual report which shows our historical performance of a year, which was a very interesting year, I might add. I'll draw those of you who are not financially interested is the word. Nerdy's another good word, yeah. So the summary which details our little numbers, our big operation. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Panovich, do you wish to speak? Is there any debate? There appears to be none. Deputy Mayor Finn.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you, John, for those of us that aren't as nerdy, but I think the big picture is telling us a good story. We've pulled off a lot of capital projects over the year, including investing in Te Matapihi, Frank Kitts Park, Southern Landfill Extension, the Council's Housing Action Plan, a district plan, sludge minimisation, the list goes on. So I think while we are always in the face of being critiqued for what we don't do, I think this is a good time to reflect on what we have done. I'd also like to praise the council and team for being nominated for over 10 awards. I love getting awards or being nominated for them. So yeah, just thanks the team for the really great work. And also just want to note that the tech sector is taking over in our contribution to our GDP, so I think we should also continue to focus and invest in that area for employment reasons. Thank you.
All right, we will now go to a vote. That is carried. I just wanted to note to councillors who are online, if you are going to be online, as you may be aware, you no longer count towards a quorum. So could you please advise me if you are going to be online in advance so we can make sure that we have enough people in the room and I think that would be a message that would, from all chairs of all committees, that we would please ask that you now do is advise us. So yes, so now, sorry, Councillor Chung.
Sorry, just while you're talking about the people being online, is it correct that if you're online, you can't come onto public excluded issues?
That is not the case. However, we will, this is a conversation to be had offline and not as part of the committee meeting. Right, so we will now, actually what we're going to do now, and I just want to sort of seek your forbearance, having a meeting on a Tuesday after a long weekend, that for the next item, I understand that an amended substantive is being finalised now. So we will go to morning tea now. And we will aim to come back. Sorry, but it's just, you know, rather than sort of take little breaks, want to kind of resolve the amended substantive and any other amendments you have for this or any other paper. So we will aim to be back at 10 o'clock. But if it is a little bit later, that is the reason why. So we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you. an amended substantive along the lines of what has been signalled to councillors already from the Mayor's office has been emailed to you, or is being emailed to you very soon. But we will start the process of moving on to the next item, being the LTP amendment and 25-26 annual plan process. Know my Baz, Raina? I just wait and see who comes up, and because it said Andrea, but you're here. So we're going to have a short presentation and an opportunity for questions. Over to you.
Morena councillors, yes, we've got a short presentation just to take you through the background and where we're at, and so we're all on the same page. So the last time we kind of talked to you about the 25-26 annual plan was on 26 September, where we kind of agreed and outlined a time frame, some early planning assumptions, but also we noted some risks in terms of uncertainties, notably the share sale, local water done well, and NZTA funding. Then on 10 October, Council made a decision on the share sale, and in essence that triggered an LTP amendment. Following the NOM, the underlying risks in essence still remain. We've got an undiversified investment portfolio, and we've got increasing under-insurance risk, and as a consequence we have to address that, and that's what is required through the LTP amendment. In terms of where we're at now, if we can get to the next slide. We've now incorporated an LTP into the timeline, so we had some early signals in 26 September in terms of what that could look like. We finalised that now. As part of the amendment process, we have to update the financial strategy, and as a consequence we have to look at the capital program. On 10 October, we talked at a high level about some principles we could use in terms of the capital review. We've re-included that in this paper, so if there's any feedback on that, we'd appreciate that. But in essence, they're guiding us in terms of what we'll come back to with you in options on 21 November. So in terms of those principles, what we've got is, in essence, what we would do is prioritise renewals. So that is the funding of existing assets. As part of the last 24 LTP, if you will recall, we actually we funded them at 75% of unconstrained renewal funding, and that led to a matter of emphasis in our LTP by Audit New Zealand. And as a consequence, our view is that is not an area we should be looking at, so that's an area we would prioritise for funding. The other area is projects that are substantially in train, so things that are contractually committed or spending is well advanced. Those are obviously not areas we'd be looking at. Other capital projects that are in essence funded to meet legislative and regulatory requirements is another principle that we would say is important to guide in terms of where we look for capital savings. And in other areas, of course, we're looking for where we can make early savings. So it's something we're looking at, particularly the first 5 years. So rather than the out years, we're also looking to prioritise the first 5 years. Another factor that's in our thinking in terms of principles is DCs. So a lot of our capital program is funded, or some of our capital program is funded through DCs. So just being careful in that space as well, because if we take the project out, then if we've collected funding for that, we need to have to return it. So these are just high-level principles that we are using as officers to guide our thinking in terms of the capital review. I'll hand over to Raina to talk through insurance and financial strategy.
Kia ora koutou. As part of the LTP amendment, one of the most important things that we'll be needing to review is our financial strategy. As a result of the notice of motion, we need to look at mitigating the risks addressed in our financial strategy around an undiversified investment portfolio and under-insurance risk. So as we move through this process, we will be looking to review the insurance headroom that is held within the debt to revenue ratio and the debt capacity that the council has. These will all be considerations for financial prudence. Some of those other considerations are around the condition and performance of our assets, balanced budget considerations, depreciation funding, debt and credit ratings, insurance risks, climate change and unplanned events, and rates affordability. Now, these parameters for financial prudence will be brought back to you on the 12th of November workshop, where we will talk to those in more detail. Now, this is where we're looking to get through the financial strategy, and each of those blocks is what we need to work through as part of the financial strategy. So we've got our debt capacity, we've got the amount of insurance headroom we'll need to hold, and there's also the difference between our 225% self-imposed debt to revenue ratio and the 280% LGFA limit debt to revenue ratio. Now, I just wanted to highlight here the difference between those two amounts and the purpose, the reason that we're holding that there. So we need to hold that headroom there to mitigate risks for some unknown things like affordability, so for example, the costs of borrowing, unknown conditions of assets. We've got a lot of assets in our portfolio that we don't understand the condition of, and therefore the costs required to maintain those or renew those assets. Climate impacts and unknown events. For example, you'll remember, for those of you that were here during COVID-19, we were in the middle of preparing an annual plan, and as a result of the pandemic, we had to debt fund some of our lost revenue. So holding that headroom just allows for events like that to be managed, and of course rates affordability as well. So we'll work through what those different blocks look like as part of the workshops on the 12th and the 13th of November. We're also working through the insurance roadmap, and I just wanted to highlight some of the other pieces of work that are happening as part of that work, as well as looking at our other financial strategy components. So the establishment of the PIF was only one component that we had proposed to manage the insurance risk. Through the insurance roadmap, there were some other things that we were looking at doing, and that work will continue and will be brought back to you as well. So there was work on the loss modelling, climate risk assessment, and assessing alternative risk transfer options. So there will be some more information coming through later workshops and also to the Audit and Risk Committee as well. Back to you, Paz.
So just in terms of timelines, just to wrap up on that, so we've currently got 2 workshops scheduled. One's on the 12th of November. In essence, we'll focus on the question of financial prudence and the financial strategy and insurance. And then on the 13th of November, we'll come back to you with a capital program review, some initial thinking in terms of where we're at with that. And then on the committee date in terms of decision making is on 21 December. Following that, what we're looking to do is get the budget ready before Christmas, so 11 December is earmarked for that, so that is both the annual plan budget as well as the capital review. After that, we follow pretty much a very similar time frame that we do with normal LTPs. We build a consultation document that goes to audit for review. You approve it for consultation. It goes out for a month using the special consultative procedure. We have hearings, we have final deliberations, we have audit again, and then we have final adoption for an LTP amendment as well as an annual plan, as well as striking the rates all before 1 July next year. I'll leave it there, but happy to take questions.
Thank you. And councillors, you now have the amended substantive in your inbox, so there's an opportunity for ask any questions about those words as well. I will start with Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Reina. Thank you for this. And my first question is regards to setting the principles. I wonder if establishing facts before setting principle is better than setting principles before you have the facts. The reason I'm saying is that personally I don't know if we have any what our insurance risk appetite looks like. what a risk appetite looks like, and the insurance roadmap from 2022, if that one still applies, or if we are working on new insurance roadmap. And the third part is regards to some of the figures that we had when it comes to the CapEx cut. We had a bit of questions, and without establishing the fact how much is exactly required, what is the modeling that has been used, how are we going to set principles when we don't have those facts? And have you thought of that? I just wonder if you can touch on this.
I'll touch on the insurance headroom, the insurance roadmap. So the insurance roadmap that we're working towards is still the same insurance roadmap. We're not looking at revisiting that. That was a complete and comprehensive review of different ways that we can mitigate our insurance challenges in the work that we're doing. So that will be ongoing, and as that work progresses, that will inform future financial strategies as well. The world of insurance doesn't stop at a point in time, so we need to continue to revisit that. And equally, the ways that entities and public entities and private entities are looking at mitigating is evolving quite quickly, so we're continuing to factor that into the work that we do, and we provide regular updates to the Audit and Risk Committee on that. In terms of the modelling, we haven't provided any advice in terms of what needs to be cut in terms of the capital program. What we've given is we've given scenarios, so you could see the impact. The point of the 12th of December workshop is to take some of those scenarios and get some broad agreement. But this is all happening at pace, and so, in order to meet the timeframes, we do need to set some parameters to pull together the capital program to provide advice. If we don't have those parameters, we've not got any guidance from you as elected members as to how you want us to proceed on this strategy, and we need that kind of information to inform the work that we're doing.
12th of November, did you mean? Sorry, because you said December.
Correct, absolutely. I wish we had a wee bit more time, but no, 12th of November, apologies.
One more question.
Yes.
Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, again, and when it comes to the communication, how this LTP amendment will be communicated with the community, it says it's similar to the one we had, the previous one. Does that mean online? And my preference would be something different. So is that what you mean?
I was talking about the timeline in terms of the various steps and stages and gates that we've got to go through in terms of deliberations, consultation, audit, and so on and so forth. I haven't specifically spoken about communication or consultation. It's a little bit early, I think, but once we start making decisions, we'll bring back that kind of advice, and that's kind of outlined in the paper as well. We've said that in that particular instance, we'll be coming back with further advice once we know what the shape and look of the LTP amendment looks like.
On page 19 and 75, Article 75, or it says, a full communication plan will be developed to be used across the amendment process, including key messaging, information on what is in and out of scope, and uploaded to a public website, similar to the process used for 2024-34. So is this only for the process, not the amendment itself? So when it comes to the amendment, we might be going back to similar to what we used to do, not the one we used this year, where we had a lot of the consultations online, not face-to-face.
Our standard practice is that we do a lot of consultation online. It's often supplemented with face-to-face conversations as well, but it kind of depends on what the proposal is. Once again, the team is actively looking at that, but it's a little bit early to come and say at this meeting exactly what that looks like. But we'll come back to you and have a conversation with you.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for all your work under a short time frame. Just the borrowing covenants, so just for academic purposes they were to increase, what would be the implications?
We'd have to work through what they would look like. We have had advice from S&P around the impacts of possibly increasing that debt to revenue headroom, but it's all around the financial prudence, and those parameters that we'll bring back on the 12th of November will help determine where that should sit, essentially. Andrea, I don't know if you had anything else to add to
I
that.
would probably add to that, if we were to increase our 225%, if that's the question that you're asking, we need to service that, whatever we borrow. And so that would result in increased rates, because we need to fund the interest costs on and fund the cost of borrowing. So that would have an impact. We know that Standard & Poor's are carefully looking at those parameters. It could be that we receive a downgrade for going, above that, given the risks that Raina outlined in the slide around many of our unknowns and making sure that we have capacity to respond to those unknowns in those events. So it's about the implications from sector commentators and reviewers that could have a negative consequence, but it would also have a rates impact and, would increase our rates.
Okay, thank you. I have asked about this, the OPEX. So you think that there may be a chance to reduce the rates through changes in the capital program, but are we able to look at maybe some of the bigger items of expenditure in the OPEX area?
As a result of reducing the capital program, there will be flow-on impacts to depreciation and interest costs that will therefore reduce out years' rates increases, all other things being equal. In regards to OPEX and whether or not that's in scope, I'm not sure, Andrea, did you want to comment on that one?
I think that's part of the annual plan process that you need to consider, not part of the LTP amendment. So the LTP amendment is kind of the financial strategy component, and then you've got the annual plan alongside it. So that information will also be considered as part of the annual plan.
So that's helpful. Can I just clarify then that generally annual plans are for smaller things, not for those bigger changes?
Correct. That is the case. In making annual plan decisions, they shouldn't be materially or significantly different to the long-term plan. If you're starting to do that, you're creating other amendments to the LTP, and that would create more significant issues for us to work through at this point in time.
Okay, that's helpful. Just last question. I presume for the projects that are in train, we will still look to be as economical as possible?
Absolutely, yes. We will be reviewing the costs associated with those projects as well.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I just want to ask how we, when we're looking at the CapEx expenditure, how do we ensure that we have as much transparency around the numbers as possible? And I ask that because of over the last few days, the cost for the Frank Kitts Park development has come about, and I don't think many of us were aware of the amount of funds that had been allocated, i.e. sort of $52 million over 6-7 years. So I just wondered, how do we make sure that we've got all the information that we need to be able to identify where we can make CapEx savings?
So I'll answer that question. I think we strive to make everything as transparent as we possibly can. Raina did send out the CapEx program at the cost centre level to councillors during the development of the 24-34 long-term plan. That was fully provided to councillors, and you've got that information. If it is broken, if you want it broken down into further levels, you can always request that information. We can get it. It's hard. I know that Councillor Randall has sat down with Raina to work through some of that information. We will work with you as much as we possibly can. That's part of the process. I think remembering also that the LTP is a statement of intent as well. So, in the first few years of the LTP, you'll get more specificity in terms of capital costs, but as things go out in the later years, you'll get estimates because we simply don't know what those costs are going to be, and we will always bring you that information as projects are scoped up and business cases are developed. HUP 2 is a very good example of that. At the moment, we've got some broad costs in there that is an estimate, but we still need to bring back the business case for you to make that assessment. So it's the best available information that we've got at a point in time, and we'll always bring back those additional decisions for you to make.
Okay. My second question is around the Disaster Resilience Fund, which is mentioned in the new recommendations in the substantive. What experience has the council got? Will you be looking at external advisors?
Yes.
To come and help?
Yes, we will be.
Following on from that, we got quite a bit of feedback about our approach to insurance from, albeit members of the public, but people that had advice in this area. Is there any way, and maybe it's there in the Audit and Risk Committee, but is there a way that we can make it a bit more explicit about what our approach is so that...
I think we've had a couple of workshops, and we tried to do that in the last year by holding workshops on the insurance roadmap so we could give greater transparency around this. It's very complex. We've committed to the Audit and Risk Committee that we'll continue to do that, and that's an open action item. And as Raina and Baz have noted, on the 12th of November. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get my months correct before I say something wrong. We will bring back a further conversation on insurance just to make sure everyone has that detail, but if there's other things that we can do to make that more transparent, we're happy to take advice on that.
I have one more question, but I'm happy to go on the list. Okay. I just, as part of the work that we're doing around insurance and disaster resilience funds, etc., are we looking at the other councils in our region about what they're doing?
Yeah, yes, we are, but I would note that probably across the country, aside from Christchurch and also Auckland, we are leading some of the work in the insurance space. So our staff are invited to numerous conferences throughout the year to present on this. Other councils are not necessarily in the same space that we are. They are still purchasing just traditional insurance because that is all they have the capacity and the knowledge to undertake. We are far more advanced in our work program than those other councils. So my staff are, as I said, often invited to risk management forums and other fora to speak at those events. What I'd also note is that because of that, we're not just engaging with other councils, we're also engaging with other public and private entities to understand what they are doing to mitigate risks. So we've recently had conversations with EQC, who have set up a catastrophe bond. We have had conversations with the airport and with New Zealand Post, who have set up captive insurance. We've looked at parametric solutions as that's been applied to the stadium. All of this work is completely ongoing and have been undertaken. We haven't bought those things to, the parametric we looked at wasn't beneficial to the council, so we're waiting for the markets to kind of look at that further. We'll continue to monitor it. We were asked, and in the last paper to the Audit and Risk Committee, we outlined that we'd bring back further advice on catastrophe bonds and captive insurance, and we're proposing to do that. I think we've got all the bases covered based on, the advice and work that we're doing and what we're getting here, but we do have limited ability to set up these things without funds. A captive requires funds, and we're looking at what we can do in the abstract of that.
Thank you.
I'm just checking in about time. I've got a full list of those of you with questions. I would like to try and get questions done in about the next half an hour, which have given us nearly an hour on questions. So just a heads up about the time. Councillor Young.
Just thinking about the leases, is it possible to have a list of where all the leases are and how long the lease is and how much there is to go, and estimated value and how much we get from? I know it's a lot of information, but it's just we're talking about selling the leases, but they're actually quite a significant source of income to us, are they not?
Yes, we can provide that information on a generic basis. We've got that, and I'll ask Eston to circulate that post this meeting. And you're absolutely right. If we do sell ground leases, that will have an impact on rates because we lose revenue that we're going to have to offset.
Councillor Benera?
Cara, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My first question relates to the level of certainty required, I guess, by staff to proceed with the signings of contracts for things which are generally understood by for example, the time of the workshop later in November, to not be on the agenda for reductions or rephasing as part of our capital program. And I suppose the question is how much certainty that such things would not be subjected to cuts, rephasing, etc., would be required before officers would feel comfortable proceeding with contracts.
So I missed part of the first part of the question, but I think the question was in relation to contracts in terms of capital projects, in terms of what we're doing in that space. We're just taking a cautionary approach until some initial decisions are made on 21 November. And so that's all that the statement reflects in the report in front of you. Obviously, you know, there is a whole range of things that won't be touched, and that work will continue as per normal.
And once we have some degree of direction set for what won't be touched, would officers feel comfortable continuing to sign contracts on those things?
My understanding is yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And last one, just on the postponement on the work of the rating reviews policy, I take the point on staff time with relation to a lot of other things having to be rephased. But in the papers, it seems to say that the prime motivation for this is not wanting to consult the public twice on two different things. Is that the reason? Is that the prime reason that we're postponing the rating review work, or is it also because of staff time concerns?
It's absolutely a mixture of both. It's capacity for the staff and also capacity for the community to make sure that they can really understand the impacts of changing the rating base and make sure that they're able to give that feedback. As part of, with the LTP amendment, with the focus being on changes to the capital program, that will most likely take precedence over understanding what the impact could be from changing the rating base. So it's definitely both, and it's just making sure that there is capacity both with staff and the community, and actually for councillors to have understanding of the public's feedback as well. So oral hearings, etc. too. So it's just making sure that there's capacity everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just going back a few slides around the debt headroom. Notwithstanding the things you spelt out between the 225 and the 280% limit, but we do currently have more than 500 million in that gap for every year of the LTP as budgeted. Is that correct?
No, the LTP that was adopted had $272 million as an insurance headroom over the 10 years of the long-term plan. However, that was breached through the first 8 years of the long-term plan, meaning that there wasn't sufficient debt capacity under our 225% limit to hold that headroom.
Sorry, I mean, I'm clarifying. The gap between 225 and 280, that provides 500 million plus in every single year of the LTP.
No, that varies year on year depending on what the debt and the revenue is, because it's a calculation based on the revenue.
Okay, there's a spreadsheet that came to us earlier that contradicts that, so we need to clarify that, but I'll take that offline. Sorry, Andrew, you talked about increasing the from the 225% limit increases the cost of borrowing. But if we're not, that's only if we're borrowing, right? If we're going from 225 to 280%, but we're not actually putting an extra cent into capital program, we're just reflecting that that headroom is accessible. That doesn't immediately have an impact on borrowing. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct in terms of actual borrowing, in terms of headroom and what the implications of that. Standard & Poor's, for example, could look at those signals and look at the fact that that is our intent, and therefore look to make review ratings on that basis, which would have an impact on our cost of borrowing as well.
So that brings me to sort of like Christchurch. I think their limit's currently 275, but they're operating well in the low 200s in terms of their actual borrowing, but they've got that full capacity on the table. I think it's almost close to $1 billion that they can go to. So is there a logic of moving to that Christchurch model, or how do Christchurch address that Standard & Poor's risk? Because theoretically, at any time, Christchurch can max out their credit card, but they're just saying we've got 275 there, but we're not going to go anywhere near actually operating it in practice.
So Christchurch City Councils are very different scenario to Wellington City Council, and I think we debated this in the very first workshop that we did have for our financial strategy as part of the long-term plan. There's a few key things that I'd point out in regards to Christchurch. Number one is they're a high growth council, and so they have significant development contributions coming in compared to us. They also have significant new dwellings to share the rates load across coming on board in any given year. Christchurch City Council, while unfortunately they had to go through an earthquake disaster, that doesn't mean they have much better information about their assets than we do, because they've got a lot of new assets in terms of their portfolio. The third thing is they don't have the same risks that we do, because their council group is far more diverse than ours is. They have significant benefit in owning an airport, an energy company, a bus company, a whole lot of other assets that they can get dividends off quite substantially, and have intergroup subvention payments, etc. So their financial strategy is fundamentally different to ours, and looking at that and how those risks and issues can be mitigated. We don't have that luxury, and so we need to build a financial strategy that is bespoke to our council.
Councillors, can I ask, if you ask a question, could you please give our team the courtesy of listening to the answer? Councillor Free.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask about the growth strategy and how much information we've got about how our ratepayer base is going, and what information we've got about likely projections going forward, in a bit more detail than just the 30 to 50%.
We do look at this every single year. It's really difficult to calculate what that growth looks like, but essentially we look at building consents and things throughout the year and what that growth in the ratepayer base will look like. Throughout the year we estimate what that is, and then the closer to the end of the year we get, we kind of make a final call on what that is. You'll recall it's generally about 0.6% that we hold, but it is quite hard to forecast what that's going to be, because we need to have all the consents and everything and all the information available to do that.
Just looking retrospectively then, have we met that 0.6% target?
Yes, we generally have, yes.
Yes, okay. The other question I wanted to ask is probably for Andrea. I see that we've put back on the table the Disaster Resilience Fund. Is there a quantum that we'd need to aim for in that to really get good returns?
We will, so the point of the fund would be to look at mitigating our insurance risk, not to return any kind of return, although we'd look at achieving that as well. We need to bring advice back to council on that, and that is the point of the recommendation. We don't have all of that information to hand. We need to do a lot of work in that space, and would need to bring that back to you and have that consultation with the community if they're happy with us proceeding on that basis.
The only reason I probably want to ask this question is the point made by Councillor Young. The things that we might sell to put the money into this fund have been returning some money to us. So wouldn't we have to ensure, from prudence sake, that we're at least getting that kind of return back?
Yes, we would look to provide that in the advice and the pros and cons of that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just as I'm keeping an eye on the time, remember, councillors, our decision today is about the process. So people have been, nearly everybody has delved into sort of detailed financial questions. However, when we get past that hour, I would ask you to limit your questions more specifically to anything about the decision-making process. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to clarify a couple of points about the report. On paragraph 11, it says that the option, sorry, in paragraph 11 it says, oh, sorry, I've got the wrong thing. In there it says, is the option about selling the airport shares still going to be consulted on as part of this process? I can't remember exactly
what we need to do in undertaking this LTP amendment is we need to include within the consultation document all reasonably practicable options. And so what we have looked at is we've already consulted on this once and we included all reasonably practicable options. So we will still have those options, but it is the intent, as we understand it, that the preferred option is not one of sale, but of retaining the airport shares and looking at other ways to mitigate our risk.
Okay, thank you. In terms, another impact we've had is the funding cut from NZTA in terms of the co-funding, and a significant amount of funding that we expected is not being provided. Could you just elaborate a little bit more about how that impacts this process and when we're going to get information around that?
There should be information provided soon. The amount that would need to be reduced from the capital program as a result of that not getting that funding will need to be incorporated into the review of the capital program as well. We will provide more advice on that.
Okay. In terms of the postponement of the commitment to contracts, just to confirm, would that include the Golden Mile project?
So we have an existing LTP. A decision was made to amend that. Now we have to resolve the financial strategy, and part of that will be looking at the capital program. Once we've got clarity in terms of what the capital program in terms of options looks like, that will determine in terms of what is untouched, and all of those will are subject to contract work.
Okay.
Yes, it includes Golden Mile.
Okay. I guess one last question.
Yes, quick one.
Okay. So thank you, Raina and Andrea and the team for Raina and the team for being so transparent. I've already met with you, as you mentioned, and you are providing some project funding information. We are going to be able to get some project profile information on the major ones, hopefully before the key workshop.
Yes, absolutely. I'm working on that now, and it will just be based on projects where we do have a little bit more information. Also, though, noting, like Andrea said, it is a statement of intent, and we, as part of the LTP, we allocate funding for certain activities, and the more detailed allocation is through business cases and approval of project spend. So we will provide what we can. Yes.
Thank you, and thank you for all your work that this disruption has caused you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I just want some clarification on things that I'm not quite sure I understand. If we have and Andrea, I know you mentioned OPEX comes into the into the annual plan, not into the long-term plan. But if we actually cut our spending on OPEX now, does that actually affect the amounts that we actually need in the long-term plan? Sorry, was that a bit confusing?
Yeah, so if we're reducing operating costs as part of the annual plan, that will have a flow-on effect for the long-term plan. Is that what you?
Yes. So can we actually calculate that amount? Say if we have a 10% cut in operating spending, can we actually deduct that off the long-term plan, the amounts that we're looking at saving?
Perhaps I can answer that. I think if we were to decrease our operating expenditure by 10%, Councillor, we would have to look quite seriously at the levels of service that we are providing to our community. We have cut significant amounts out of our operating expenditure over the past 6 years plus, I would hazard a guess, and we're operating in quite constrained circumstances. The majority of our costs, operational costs, are coming from depreciation, interest, insurance. You know, those are fixed costs. We don't have other costs that we can simply just cut without having a significant impact on the levels of service that our community is provided. As we understand it, this LTP amendment is not looking to decrease levels of service. That would be a separate discussion and a separate debate, and we'd need to factor that into the timetable that we've got, which we would struggle to do with the capability and capacity of the organisation.
Yep, okay. Great, thank you. So second question is about the ground leases, and I realise that we've already asked for a copy of these, but is it correct that we can actually sell ground leases, if we have a better option to sell some ground leases over another, we don't need to actually wait for the lease to actually expire. We can actually sell ground leases even if there's some period, some years left to run on it, because we can sell them as they are, can't we? Is that correct?
In some cases, yes. But we just want to make sure that we follow an appropriate strategy with all our ground leases, so that we're not just selling them for the sake of selling them. We're actually getting the right return on those ground leases, and our property team are very aware of all the specific and individual requirements for every single one of our ground leases.
Great, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora. Just to touch base on the insurance roadmap, just over the last 2 years, can you tell me roughly how many workshops we have had on this and our progress and our direction and what we're doing?
So we had one specific workshop on the insurance roadmap last year for this year for the Audit and Risk Committee. There is a regular update provided to the Audit and Risk Committee. I haven't counted those up, but they are a regular agenda item on the Audit and Risk Committee. I would say we at least bring them twice a year to the Audit and Risk Committee. So those discussions are had continuously.
Yeah, great, thank you. Just going back to Councillor Calvert's question, just wondering regarding our insurance journey, would it be possible to have a page on our website?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That would be great. Just in regard to the principles, just checking that, has climate mitigation been factored in to how we make those decisions?
So the principles stand as they do. At some stage, once we come back with options, we do actually have to map that against the outcomes and the priorities that you set through the 24 LTP, and we'll provide some advice on that as part of the workshop.
Great. Okay, so just to clarify, the priorities that the community and the council set in the LTP still stand?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Just coming back to the amended substantive, I was wondering if you could briefly describe your understanding of a disaster resilience fund and how that differs from a PIF.
So I can talk to that. We'll need to bring back advice on that, and the point is that it's kind of in quotations, so that we'll bring back some options on what a disaster resilience fund could look like. It could be in the form of a PIF, it could be in the form of a captive insurance. We will bring back that advice and incorporate that in this for you.
I think that brings us to the end of the questions. Thank you, Raina. Thank you, Baz. Thanks, Andrea. I will now move the paper. And Councillor Panovich, would you like to second?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So first of all, I do want to thank the team, and I know some councillors have already acknowledged this, that the level of work that has had to be entered into, the urgency of this work and the scrutiny under which we are now working are not to be underestimated. And I wanted to express my gratitude for to the team, and especially as we go into, we just did an LTP, and as we go into the summer period, I just want to acknowledge that. I've kind of joked as we go through this process that we have one job. And really we do, as a council, have one job in terms of passing an LTP and maintaining an LTP. And that is core to every single thing this organisation does. So I just want to urge you, colleagues, to remain focused on the process of adjusting our capital expenditure program to adjust for the insurance risk. We took a fork in the road when the notice of motion was passed, and we are now on another journey. We have a limited amount of time. We are doing it, as I say, with an increased level of scrutiny, not only from the media, but also from the government, and we will have an observer joining us. The Mayor has indicated that she will be bringing together a package to help guide this discussion for us. Other councillors may have their own suggestions to make. You may vote against some of what the Mayor suggests and moves. You may support some of it. But I plead with you all to think very carefully about the end outcome, that we must have an LTP amendment. We must have a financially prudent LTP amendment, and to think about how we conduct ourselves throughout this process. This process is going to be different to the full LTP process, and I hope that we understand it's foreshortened. We are not going to have the same amount of time to process the decisions. The most significant ones to go out to the public with will need to be made by the end of the year. Find my second page of notes that I am not reading, it will also, I hope, be different in the way that we behave. And that has been highlighted to us by the Minister, and I think we all need to take that extremely seriously. So I ask that we all engage in the process in good faith and realise the need at the end, regardless of the bits that we voted for and the bits that we didn't vote for along the way, that we need to come up with this amendment, and we need to respect the validity of the decision once we have made it. And I guess that is what I have seen increasingly happen in this council. If people personally didn't vote for something, they believe it has no validity. It does. And that is something we all need to respect. The notice of motion, I will be heard in silence, councillor, that the notice of motion was a valid decision, and that has put us on a pathway that we need to take very seriously. Councillor Panovich, would you like to speak as seconder?
No.
Councillor Calvert, I believe you have an amendment. Would you like to move that now?
Thank you. So I think it's really important that whilst the notice of motion paper included a set of principles, it was probably fair to say that no one really knew how, well, some of us did, how that notice of motion might land. And there was, I think there was some thought it wouldn't be passed, but it was. So I think those series of principles, I think all in good faith, have been developed up by officers. This is the long-term plan of this council, of the elected members and Puiwi. So I think it's really important that we do stamp our mark, so to speak, and I appreciate the Mayor's going to be bringing some information back to us, but one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we try and find some consensus along the way. And when I say consensus, I'm talking probably about 3/4, because we'll never get 100% agreeing. But we really need to make sure that we are developing this next long-term plan based on the majority, because what we're here is representing the people of Wellington. And the people of Wellington have been quite vocal in saying we haven't been very comfortable with the decisions that this council has been making. So getting the principles right is really important. And I really just want to, and this amendment is acknowledging the series of principles that were developed by the officers. With the information that they knew at the time. Things have moved on very quickly in the last 3 weeks, and we just need to highlight that we will be setting the principles that this long-term plan will be based on. And so that's the basis for this amendment. And I think we just got to remember that we are here. It's not just a process. We're here representing the people of Wellington, and we need to make sure that their views are represented and they're heard. So I ask for your support, and Councillor Abdurrahman will be seconding it. Thank you.
Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Abdurrahman? Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I think as a council we receive advice from staff all the time, and we have just gone through a process where we heard how much under strain staff are with their significant work program, and I think quite frankly changing some minor wording in a noting amendment is a continued waste of that time. I think it's very fair that the Mayor, in her role as a leader of the city, brings the principles that we will make our decisions based on, but we do also need to seek advice, and the rate at which we are working, that advice is being brought by officers, and at the same time we are working in a political environment to bring our decisions. And so for that reason I probably won't be supporting this.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, I want to speak in support of this amendment. I think it's important that the public, while we did receive that advice from council at the time, I think things have moved on. We've had further discussions, and we do need to understand we do need to set and recognise that it is going to be the councillors' principles that are going to drive this process. And so I think this amended motion supports that direction more clearly than the current point. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
She just wanted to ask a question of officers, but we've moved straight into debate. Okay. I will put this to the mover of the motion to possibly answer. I mean, is there any forum that if councillors were to agree the principles, that could then be factored into the process before we've got the next paper in November? And if that's not the case, then it becomes really hard to see how councillors agreeing principles can feed in. So whilst this amendment, I don't really take any issue with it, I think it's factually correct. I'm just wondering whether there's actually, as part of my debate, the ability of any principles that are agreed by councillors in that time to actually feed into the process that will already be underway.
All right, I'm going to speak briefly against this amendment. I think we have to be very careful about any overcomplicating of this process when we are already working to such a time frame and with such restrained resources and with the scrutiny of central government. I do, however, note that the Mayor brought a set of principles which we discussed in a councillor forum. It was immediately after councillors asked the Mayor not to release it publicly, it was immediately leaked to the media. And I guess that is our opportunity, our principles, and I guess to answer Councillor McNulty's question, there is not another opportunity to revisit this process before we actually make the significant decisions which we will need to make in the middle of November. I think we talked about the whole process it's a couple of weeks. And but what I would say is that councillors should apply their own principles, a combination of the advice that they have had, the conversations they have with colleagues, and the political direction that we have to the decisions that we need to make. We can't over-egg this process. We have literally just been through a long 18-month LTP process with very many opportunities to consider things like the principles that apply to our decision making. Thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman, do you wish to speak as seconder?
Kia ora whānau. I second this motion for the fact that we previously been making decisions on the basis that we just want to respect each other. We don't want to scrutinize things, and we end up in where we are now. I really wish we had a bit of more scrutiny back in June when we make that decisions. And that amendment moved by Councillor McNulty went through, we wouldn't be here. And I proposed after October 10 vote what the next step should look like and what the long-term amendment should look like. And I presented a paper to all of you. And as part of that paper is just addressing some of this part for us to agree where we want to go and exactly what is the strategies to get there. If you want to go somewhere, unless you know the direction that is taking you, or even if you know, unless you agree on that directions, you will obviously gonna have a bit of a discussion on the way. So that is, yes, I respect and we all should support the mayor in this leadership, and she's putting something together. I appreciate that, I will be supportive of it. However, with all due respect, we also need to feed into it. It's not like, oh, whether you accept part of it or you accept all of it, it is up to you. If presented in that way, obviously it's gonna create again another issue for this council. I'm begging you again, everything that presented to us, let us have an input into it. It's not like A, B, C, D. If you want, vote for A and B and vote down C. No, I want to have a say in A and B and C. Let's have a discussion in the room and how we're going to put those things together, and then we can move forward. We are also putting not only councillors, we are putting our officers in a position of difficulty. We are developing this. If the officers are developing, we can work with them. But if the mayor is developing and just kind of putting in front of us, that's going to make it difficult. So this principle is very important. We should be developing together. But at this stage, let me refrain from what I say. When the observers come, one of the things that I will be presenting is this paper, and that is the information that we're looking for. We need to work together. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Phone. Yeah, kia ora. Can I just ask the mover of the paper if they don't agree with the officers' principles or the mayor's principles that were put forward, and that will help me make my decision on whether to vote for this or not? Thank you.
All right. Right of reply, Councillor Cowell.
Thank you. I'll address Deputy Mayor Phoon's questions. In terms of the officers, I think there could be a bit more specificity to them. And in terms of the mayor's principles, I believe that what we should have had is more of an opportunity to reach consensus amongst us. I think we had one meeting, and what we really needed to do was be able to have a bit more open dialogue to try and get to that form of consensus, and ensuring that listening to everyone as well. So, and that's why that's there. In terms of when we could actually make a formal decision, this doesn't stop us actually trying to get some agreement over the next couple of weeks. But, and I thought that maybe the principles might have been brought to council on Thursday, but there's nothing on the agenda for that. So I think there's an opportunity in the meetings on I'm not sure it's the 12th or 13th of November, for elected members and Puiwi principles at least to be on the table and to show how we are shaping our decision making. Because I noticed that I think it was Councillor Matthews made a comment about political direction. I'm not sure what the political direction is, because we haven't decided on our political direction, other than that we do need to do an LTP amendment and curtail our spending. And in terms of this overcomplicating the process, I don't see how this is overcomplicating the process. I mean, this is just simply saying that we are going to be very clear on our high-level principles, because you do the principles before you define the process, to get to where we need to be. And that's our role. That is our role as the elected members. And I can't see how some of this is going to cause so much extra work, because if you look at it, and I hope you're not just, you're looking at this particular small amendment in the in the spirit it was made, because I also noticed there was 5 additional substantive recommendations included around disaster resilience fund, but everyone seems to be relatively comfortable with this. This is just tweaking some wording and saying that that elected members will be agreeing to principles, simple as that. So I ask for your support, and if nothing else, it's just stating the obvious that should happen in good governance. Thank you.
All right, we now go to the vote. That has failed. We now move back to the substantive. Would anybody wish to speak? Councillor Pannett.
Thank you, Chair. And as per my question before, I would like to thank staff for working so hard to get this process on track, and also to the Mayor and the Chair also, because I appreciate it takes more work. And look, you know, obviously it's been a difficult couple of weeks, but certainly I am committed to a very good process moving forward, as I'm sure you all are too. And look, we do need to do some more work, just because of the water and transport issue too as well. So I think this will be demanding, but we will get through it by Christmas time. And so I'm, like I say, committed to doing that. Just a couple of points. Councillor Matthews, I agree with your point about once a vote's been made, it is valid. I agree, and as long as the process is lawful. I guess just the point I would make, though, is having been on the side of some troubling votes from my political perspective, I do think that councillors have the right to do, through legitimate means, to protest those votes. You know, I will never get over the time that the former Mayor Foster voted for the flyover after telling me he wouldn't. So, you know, sometimes there are just things that you just need to keep working on, but not all the time, because we just do need to make progress. I thank the staff for their recommendation around the rate spaces. Look, you know, I think it's a complex issue. I think it was Councillor Winero who talked about having some kind of compromise, but I agree it should just be put off for now, because it's just too many things to be going to the public with. The water issue is highly complex. There will probably be some more discussion around the airport and the Disaster Resilience Fund. So I just think it's too many things. I think we should aim as much as we can, bearing in mind the advice that we've had around trying to trim the rates a little bit, just to give a little bit of relief to people. And so that capital program I will be looking at carefully. And if there are some OPEX savings that we can make reasonably, then we should do it. And just the last point, thank you, Mayor Whānau, around the Disaster Resilience Fund. Thank you for bringing the amendment. I think we have all supported that. Councillor Brown made some useful comments about what we should actually put in it, which I think helps us move forward. And obviously everyone is dealing with the issue of insurance. Whatever we do, it will not be enough. And so it's good that we've got this roadmap, and obviously the government is going to need to come to the party, because we just will not be able to fill the gap. Households are struggling, so are councils, so the government will be as well. And so there will need to be a very concerted effort to resolving the whole insurance model as we go into quite different times. Kia ora.
Councillor McNulty.
Okay, Tian, could you just scroll down so I can see the amended substantive parts, please? Cool. Yeah, I just want to really speak to 7 to 10 and thank Michael, the chair, officers, everyone for getting this together in a very quick way over the long weekend, and just speak a little bit to it. So come from a funds management background, so the airport debate was obviously an interesting one because, you know, investing is good and diversified investing is a principle that I believe in, and I have funds for my meagre funds, but funds for my children. I put $1 away a day in their managed funds and grow it through. So I've always liked the concept that we set up something like a KiwiSaver for the city, but I didn't gel with what we were doing in terms of the previous approach, where we were looking at potentially having a board and management and paying director fees and things along those lines. So I've quite a strong view around the fact that we have a really healthy funds management sector in this country. We have over 30 providers of KiwiSaver last time I looked at it, and even though we're looking at a managed fund or a boutique fund, we still have an incredible amount of expertise through this country in that space. And there's really competitive options on the table around how we can do that. And you think of something with a index fund with a 25 basis points management fee, for instance. I think that's compelling, that we don't necessarily have to build all these expertise in-house and set this up in such a gold-plated way. We can just get going, and hopefully councils in future then can look at that more sophisticated approach when it warrants it. So really supportive that we're putting this back in. 0.7 to 10, and yeah, I've just really, you know, my focus will be around making sure we do this in a way that is cheap as chips, so to speak, and as long as we get the market return, which obviously is something an index fund does, then I think we've done well. So happy to support this into the wider LTP. Just thank you to officers for the work that they've put together on this as well, and I'll leave it there.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora. We are where we are and we start today, so thank you, Chair, for your remarks at the beginning. I think they are very strong and we need to take those on board, so thank you. I do just really want to acknowledge the staff and just to remind us as councillors that going forward, I know that many of us email quite a lot and also not in the hours of work, so I am going to just publicly say we need to make sure that we are looking after our staff at this council and that we are putting pressure on them, albeit this is the majority of councillors reset the direction, but there is an impact on our staff. And so they are quietly letting us know today, but I want us to know in a stronger way that this is having an impact on our whole organisation. And so the way that we can help is that we can limit our emails, we can be respectful, and we can just make things easier if we can, so that we can get through the next 6 weeks. Thank you for hearing me on that. The next one, I just want to acknowledge all our team who have been working on the insurance roadmap. I've been aware of this since last term on council and the work that's been going on, and I'm really appreciative of it. I think it would be great for the public to see what we're actually doing so that we can refer to the space. It is hard to dig out, so thank you. It'd be great if we could have that publicly available. And I just want to acknowledge that the work that we have done, it is good to hear that we are leaders in the nation for the work that we are doing. So thank you to the staff for that. I just want to acknowledge the principals and acknowledge the mayor bringing hers and the officers. I mean, the officers' principles make absolute sense to me, be it whether they were specific or not. This is another area where we can be a little more lenient, recognising the time if they're not specific enough. But I think for me personally, and from what I hear of the public, that climate mitigation is a priority, and that'll be an area I will be voting for or not, but that is really important principle. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to respond to Councillor McNulty's comments. I'm not too sure where he's got this idea that we're going for a gold-plated funds management model, because he has raised that point previously, and I had checked with management, and frankly, that was never the intention, and I can't see any written evidence or any other evidence for that matter that that was the intention. We have discretion as to how we go about this fund. And I think that there are two very important issues that we should keep in mind. One of them is the actual funds management, and that may well be at 25 basis points or who knows how much. But it's also important to have governance of a fund, because the fund needs to actually have the right risk profile in its investment strategy. And if you look at New Plymouth as an example of this isn't expensive, but it is definitely worth employing people at a governance level to actually monitor the risk of the fund, because as you know, those of you who have been involved in funds management, risk and return are inextricably linked. And it's quite important that this fund's risk appetite is appropriate, because we don't want to end up with a situation where either it takes a large loss at some stage in the future and it's an uncomfortable position, or for that matter, it's far too conservative in the way we go about investing it. So a governance layer is going to be very important at how we set up this fund, and it will cost us some money to do it. But I don't necessarily feel that we should be looking at this as being an absolute cost minimisation exercise. We want to make sure we get value for money, of course, but we do want to make sure we do this efficiently and effectively and get the right structure in place.
Councillor Free.
Firstly, I'd really like to thank the staff, and it's not, I usually forget to thank the staff, I just take their work for granted, but I have been very impressed today with the quality of the answers we've received. The answer that I put about Wellington Water, we got some very useful information there, but more importantly, the way in which our staff were able to compare our risk profile with, for example, what's been going on in Christchurch, and highlight some really significant differences in our challenges. I actually am glad the last amendment failed, and it's failed by a big margin. I didn't see the numbers exactly, but I think this is the very time when we need to start actually having confidence in each other, and there are ways to make sure that our voices politically are heard. We will have, I'm sure, some councillor-only time. We'll have some sessions dedicated to making sure we have a chance to talk to the Mayor, who rightfully is leading this process. It is actually the job under the Local Government Act, it is actually the Mayor's job to lead the process of the LTP, and by extension an LTP amendment. And I'm really confident in her ability to put forward a set of really good principles in conjunction with the staff. I felt that amendment which failed was a really pointless noting amendment, and I'm glad it failed. Sorry, I have to say that. So to thank the staff, to say that I have confidence in our process, and also just to say that to me it is actually important that we go into the PIF or the Resilience Fund with clear objectives. One of the things that's been said consistently is the airport gave us such a great return. Well, actually, from my calculations, it gave us about a 3 to 4% return. Our ground leases give us about a 3 to 4% return. And Councillor Brown has alluded to the New Plymouth Investment Fund. He did send us around an email with some facts and figures about that. That, on average, has returned a 7.3% return. It has not only grown in its actual amount in the fund, but has returned $250 million to the council that set it up in cash over the time as it was established, which was in 2004. So, I think we've got every confidence to think that it's a good thing to have an investment fund. And I look forward to us working out how we're going to manage this and the amended LTP going forward.
I don't see any Councillor Rogers.
Sorry, yes, I did just want to reflect both on the questions that were had before this paper, but also were raised in debate on an earlier substantive around perhaps not being able to understand the information that has, in my view, been presented to us through the insurance roadmap. Since 2013, the Audit and Risk Committee and committees of the whole have been receiving extensive reports on our insurance situations. It developed from a very small number back in 2013 to the large number that we have now. And just reflecting on the minimal amount of time that our staff had, I would implore all of you to, in the first instance, read the papers that we have received as a council. There is a lot of very good advice about the situation that we are in contained within those papers. And also going back and watching previous briefings, especially if you didn't attend them for whatever reason, they are very good, very informative, and does does allow you to create a very good picture of the issue that we are facing. That then allows you to take that out to the community and have the discussion. It's important to reflect on the fact that as elected members, we have a responsibility to ensure that our community understands the issues that we are talking about. Even if the proposed solution for them is one we don't agree with, we should still very much be making sure that the community is aware of the problem that that solution is seeking to solve. In broader terms, I wanted to address the amendment that the Mayor has brought forward. I do like the broader wording of the Disaster Resilience Fund. In particular, I am quite interested in the idea of a captive, but especially with the limited amount of capital that we're looking at investing in this fund, I also do like the idea of a captive cell and whether that could be used to lower the startup capital required for an effective fund that could be used in the event of a disaster in Wellington, which is increasingly likely. So I will be supporting this.
All right, I will briefly speak in reply. I just want to acknowledge the point that you made, Councillor Pannett, about protest. And absolutely, if I think of a key decision that this council made, which was to increase funding on the town hall. I did not support that. However, when the decision was taken, my attitude has had to change to being focused on delivering that project to the most timely effect that we can, and and financially as prudent as we can. And that has become my focus, even though I did not support it. So I do want to acknowledge that, because we do need to have some degree of collective responsibility. And it doesn't mean we agree to the thing, but it means we have to support the organisation to do it. I want to briefly mention the rating policy review and the paper delaying that work. And I want to say that that is quite a painful decision for me, because I deeply support that work. However, the decisions that we have made up until now have consequences, and that is one. We are an organisation that is limited in its size and its scope, and we have to focus our attention. And so therefore I accept that change, even though it probably means I am not going to be able to progress something that is very dear to my heart. And I guess I want to say generally that it is now the time to look forward and not back. That, and with all due respect about papers that people have presented, I think an observer is likely to say about a paper about insurance that it actually doesn't compare to the comprehensive work that our organisation is doing. And I think it's time to let that go and move forward with the job that we all have, which is to do an LTP amendment. And I want to thank Councillor Free for your comments about the Mayor's leadership and the Mayor's office. I want to thank your team and to you too, Tori. And I guess acknowledge that this is going to be hard. It is not going to be easy. We are all going to see things that we love not happen, or happen later, or happen in a different way as a result of the decisions that have been made. But they have been made. We need to look forward, get on with it, and do so in a way that can increase confidence in our decision making. Otherwise, there will not be a next election for us. And that is the job we have now. So we'll go to the vote. Okay, Councillor Free has corrected her vote to vote yes. Thank you. Thank you to you all. I appreciate, and I'd love to see this unanimity continue. I suggest we take a 5-minute wharepaku break and before we move on to the next item. to our next item, just a minor consideration. Water, local water done well, and know my Jenny and Margot, and I want to especially warmly welcome our new Chief Infrastructure Officer, Jenny Chetwynd. Welcome, Jenny, and in the hot seat already, but you have a very great team with you, so lovely to see you. And I will leave it to you to introduce the report.
All right, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jenny Chetwynd tōku ingoa. It's a real pleasure to join you, especially at these times. It's been an interesting first week for me last week. I'm sure it's going to continue. So thank you for your welcome, and I think I've met most of you by now, and if I haven't, I'll try and do that over the next week or so, but I think I've met you all. Okay, so I'll just do a brief intro to this paper, and then I will ask Margot and Jenny, the experts, to take over in terms of the substantive and what's going on in the paper. But just briefly to intro, this is continuing your conversation about local waters done well, and we're on our path to develop the Water Services Delivery Plan by next September, as you're all aware. This paper specifically today focuses on the criteria and the assessment and the process to develop up the options for you to consider. There's a lot of detail in this paper on options, on criteria and assessment and how those options are being developed. And we're specifically looking for you to endorse us staying with the regional approach, the work that's been done by the regional working group, to develop up what a regional option might look like, which will come back to you for consideration in December. So the conversation is coming to you today because we are coming back in December with some options. Today is focusing on the assessment, the requirements, the objectives, to give you some comfort that all the right things are being thought about as those options are being developed up. So I'll ask Margot and Jenny to give you a bit more on that context, but bear in mind the conversation here today is about objectives, criteria, process, and ultimately looking for your comfort that we stay with that regional approach and that regional working group until it's finished its regional kind of option development. Okay.
Thank you, Jenny. Kia ora, councillors. I don't think there's too much more to say in terms of introducing this paper. Just a couple of things to point out, that the decision we're seeking today is not a binding decision, so it doesn't have a no exit clause attached to it or anything like that. What it is, it's about providing direction to us, the officers, and also the regional team, so that we can continue doing the work around the options assessment and also preparing for consultation early next year. You will have seen in the paper that the options analysis framework essentially has three categories. The first category is requirements, so this is shaped by government legislation, and these are essentially yes-no questions. So, for example, the access to higher borrowing through LGFA. The second category is the delivery model objectives. So these are really what will give scalable answers. So you might find the response for one option as a high answer, the next one is medium and low, that kind of thing. And then the third and equally important section is stewardship objectives. The stewardship objectives, these are the areas that are high public interest and that are particularly important to us and our communities. So, for example, our Tākaihere agreement, but also around ensuring that affordability for our more financially vulnerable community members is considered and taken into account for how we are evaluating the options in front of us. So that's essentially the introduction. I have Jenny Condi here, I'm sure you all know. So when you get into if you have any questions, and particularly around the framework, then between Jenny and myself, we'll look to answer those for you. Thank you.
Do you have questions, councillors? Councillor Randall.
Thank you. So we've had a lot of updates about the regional model, and I certainly support pursuing it. I was wondering if you could outline whether or not there will be an option for us to consider sub-regional models, for example, just Wellington and Pororua, or just Wellington, Pororua and Hutt Valley, as part of the options that we could possibly be considering.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, we definitely could consider those. However, in any relationship, the other side also needs to be interested, and ideally. So What we do know is, so Hutt City Council are having a conversation today, and the advice that's going to Hutt is the preferred option is the regional model. So entering into a conversation with Hutt on that basis is probably unlikely. And so we could explore that, but the signals we're getting from a number of other councils is their preferred is the regional model.
Okay, so apart from the regional model and the status quo, what other models, for example, a go-it-alone model, will be analysed further?
So yes, we will be including a go-alone in terms of the evaluation, and that will come back to you in the December paper as part of the shortlist for consultation decision.
Okay, and I was wondering if you could just elaborate a bit more about the stormwater side of things and what the other councils are considering in terms of their options for dealing with stormwater, given that stormwater seems to be in its own category.
Yeah, stormwater is still a tricky area, largely because we have the legislation that's coming on that is Bill 3, which is due to be introduced in December. So we are relying on the government policy statement that's been issued, and that's really the extent of the guidance we've got. So any councils that have identified the regional model as their preferred, then that will include stormwater, piped stormwater. Just check on that. Yep. Because that is that's what's been included in the recommended approach in the regional report. Yep. Otherwise, it's still to be worked through. And even on the regional approach, Councillor Randall, we still recognise there is more work to do in considering stormwater approach.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I've got two questions. One of them is about this. I mean, I think it's fine that we do the regional thing, although I guess, as you say, we don't know quite who the region will be, given that the other guys have to also say they want to be in. But do we do workshop through this thing? I mean, I don't want you guys coming back to us with a proposal in December saying, okay, here it all is and here's the final product. And I have got significant reservations about some of the information which we have been provided by the regional group. I mean, the presentation we had out of the Hutt Valley in particular I found to be extremely substandard from the perspective that it felt like a marketing exercise rather than an informing exercise. But so my first question is, will we have workshops around what is on the table now? You know, what's the process between now? I mean, I know that out there, you know, the regional group will be doing its thing, but what's our engagement with that? How's that going to work?
Thank you. We have put into your forward program a number of briefings to deep dive into particular topics. So, for example, LGFA being one of them. So that would be a chance to explore those topics, and I would appreciate that that as we explore any one of those particular topics, that other questions broader than that might come up, so we can certainly explore those. So I think we've got 4 of those in the calendar over the coming weeks, so we'll be using those as part of that approach as you refer to.
And thank you. My second question is around the alternative, because I would certainly like us to be looking at a corporatised Wellington City water operation as a counterfactual to the regional corporatised entity. So on that, what process is there to make sure that in December, when we're making our decision, we do have this corporatised Wellington water entity as one of the options that is considered by the councillors, so they can then decide if they wish to put that out for public consultation?
So that's certainly our intent, and that's part of the reasoning for bringing to you today the options analysis framework, so that you can see how we will be taking each of those options through that approach. At this stage, we haven't taken any of the options that are available to us off the table, so we would be taking those through. Whether the objectives that we have outlined in this report whether the response to those objectives mean that we end up with each of those options still on the table in December as a natural option to take forward, or whether they get discounted early in the conversation, that's part of why we have the framework that we've presented today. I just want to check with Jenny. Is there anything else you want to know? Okay, yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor McNulty.
Just want to check this is my phoning around on the weekend, but you might have better info from me. So for PCC, Hutt CC, Upper Hutt and Greater Wellington, the only consultation options I understand those councils are pursuing are enhanced status quo and regional option. Is that the understanding that you have as well?
That is our understanding, yes. I was just doing a quick recap through the councils. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't bother to go further north than that one, but yeah.
Certainly, Hutt City and Porirua City already have papers released publicly that indicate that that is the case. Upper Hutt and Greater Wellington, I haven't seen actual reports, but that is what we are expecting that they will say once they are prepared.
So we're the only council that will look at an option outside of enhanced status quo and regional model that within the Wellington City Metro, let's call it that. Yep.
Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for all your work. One of the issues that concerns me is around any accountability of a new entity. And so when I looked at the paper, it seemed to be, so the SOI and then the whatever regulations the government puts in, very little community involvement. So I guess, are you able to add anything to what they may be held, how they will be held accountable for spending a lot of money?
Sure. Again, the indications we've had in terms of government policy announcements in advance of Bill 3, which is where all of this information is going to sit, is that there will be a number of government requirements in terms of how that accountability can work. So as you've identified, the regulator in terms of the Commerce Commission, Taumata Arawai, the government have also announced that there will be requirements in terms of how the statement of expectation can be presented and the responding water services strategy that comes back from the entity. So any water organisation, their owner must provide a statement of expectation. The independent board will provide back a water services strategy. The owners can respond with feedback, but in the end, the water services strategy belongs to the independent board, and the owners cannot require amendments of the water services strategy. So that framework, assuming that it does appear in Bill 3 when it comes out in December, is the one that we have to use in terms of accountability. Around that, there may yet be some flexibility, for example, in terms of how you might prepare the constitution of the CCO when you set it up. Again, we know that that constitution will have to include a number of statutory objectives. So again, Bill 3 is going to include a number of statutory objectives that will apply to all water organisations. We do not yet know what those will be. But we are expecting, hopefully, that you might be able to add additional objectives to the constitution, for example, and that might be one lever that you have to provide more direction to a CCO. So that's one thing that we are working on, and one of the topics that we want to come back to you in one of these workshops is to kind of help make sure that you've got really good clarity around what we do know about the government model and what areas will you have options and choices, and what areas will you not have any options and choices.
Okay, thank you. And then just carrying on from that, so council has very limited control, but will still have some degree of responsibility, like through the guarantee. So if it falls over, or there is some sort of crisis or needs a very significant injection of cash, we would have to do that. We'd have to bail them out.
It would depend on the circumstances and the nature of the guarantee, but yes, that would be the case.
And just the last issue, which I'm really worried about, just given the challenges we've had with Wellington Water, is about the staffing capacity in the country. So I know they've identified that in the report as a major issue. I mean, it's obvious. But are we really going to have the capacity to be able to deliver on what we are supposed to, just given some of those challenges? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We haven't turned our attention to capacity at this point because we don't know what model elected members want to identify as the preferred option, but that is certainly a risk for whatever option goes forward. It will be a risk given the existing capacity constraints, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yes, kia ora. Just to follow up from Councillor Pannett's question, it's just the guarantee position that council is exposed to. And so it's just really trying to understand the mechanisms to flag or change if a situation like this arises. Like what steps, processes will be in place so that we can not fall into a position of being a guarantor should that happen.
So first of all, I think that being a guarantor under this kind of a situation is always the last step in terms of any kind of process. It's not dissimilar to any other council-controlled organisation if there is a level of borrowing or anything provided to them as well. And so the mechanisms within the Local Government Act apply in terms of having adequate reporting, having adequate oversight through the statement of intent, through those kind of mechanisms as well. So that is a normal process as part of the Local Government Act.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, if that's okay, Chair. So also just to bring up the question on the water meters that Councillor Abdurrahman asked earlier, can you just re-clarify how we will have the discussion with the community and at what stage? Will it be council or will it be the new water services model? I guess, yeah, just worried about losing the community on this one. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that again, we'll need to think through that quite carefully. We won't necessarily have all of the answers right now because the business case at the moment is being done separately for each of the separate councils. And, you know, the commitment here is that's being sought is to continue to look down the regional route. And so depending on the timing of where decisions are made, it will sit with, it will depend on who it sits with then. So I think we need quite a clear conversation and look to provide advice as and when that business case is completed and what the other councils are doing within the region. So it would definitely be a conversation because we'd need to manage that quite carefully.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. One more question, Chair, if that's okay. This was just a reminder, I know we have talked about it, but the capital investments we've already made, like Omaroro Reservoir, Te Wharewai Paranuku, will they be transferred over if we set up a new regional model?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, all assets would be transferred over. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I'm just noting that you've asked for our agreement for number 9, which is to continue with the regional process. Do you need our agreement to continue to investigate the alternative, which is to sort of go it alone? We haven't been asked to agree to you to continue that.
No. So the region, one of the reasons for including the regional is because it is the work that's being done is beyond just our officers. It's other officers as well, plus the regional, plus the regional project team. So it really is to give that signal and that assurance for the next few weeks to them. I will give you assurance that we are exploring the other go alone option as well. So that's why we haven't included that.
Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you, and thank you for a very comprehensive report. I do encourage anyone who's interested in this area to look at the detail you've already got to grips with what the problem space is about. With respect to stewardship objectives, which I think is incredibly important, I note that there's a range of things there, including the council that has appropriate powers to manage poor performance of water service entity, and that customers have influence over the priorities of service delivery. I've got 2 questions. The first question is, will different governance models be part of the options, in terms of how the council's influence over, for example, a regional water entity, or this council's influence will be exercised so that these objectives are met?
We're going to be bound by what is in Bill 3. So we need to, that's the framework we absolutely have to work within. And as Jenny alluded to, there may be some scope for us to add other more local objectives in there, but we have to wait until that is introduced in December before we can tell what we could do.
Okay. And I guess the other thing that's come about in my involvement with this is the exemption that the Wellington Water currently has for complying with water standards, in terms that if it doesn't meet water standards and it causes damages to property, that it's not liable. Is there any comment about how the new entity, or how the objective of having a stronger service quality element to the delivery of services to be part of the new entity, or to be part of the future for water?
I think that's one we'll have to take away, Councillor. I think off the top of my head, logically you would want that, yes. As to why that doesn't happen now, I don't know. So I'll take that away and come back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Sorry, just two more. This is, I take it very hypothetical, but it just came off the back of some of your answers to Councillor Pennant. If a future council statement of expectations basically says, actually, we want you to pare back the scale of investment, it's just too much on our consumers, the way water rates have gone up, and we're trying to use the influence. Do you think the entity's obligations to, say, regulators are probably going to take priority over a statement of expectations in that circumstance?
Yeah. It's hard to say, because we simply don't have enough detail about how this regulatory framework is going to work.
Yep.
That it's certainly a possibility that the regulator could step in that situation and say, well, actually, no, we think cutting the investment back in that way would mean you could no longer meet the quality standards that we require you to meet. Yep. But coming back to my original point, we don't know much about what that framework's going to look like or how it's going to be implemented. I have seen some indication in government announcement documents that they intend to phase it in over time, with kind of information disclosure first, and then quality standards, and then price regulation, but that might change, and we don't know, for example, how long that phasing in process might take. There's a lot of uncertainty.
Absolutely, thank you. And the other question, did we have any more clarity from the workshop last week about balance sheet impacts of solo versus regional? We weren't quite sure about the debt on the council books versus off balance sheet and the ability to go up to 500%.
Yeah, so in terms of the impact on our balance sheet, we're still working on that. There was an independent report commissioned, and that hasn't yet been finalised, so that will be a key consideration that will be brought back in the December decision making.
Councillor Pennant.
So just relating to my question around accountability is around backdoor amalgamation, which was the issue with the previous lot of reforms. Has the government sort of said anything about where they're at with looking at the function of councils? Because essentially the assets go, you've got limited control. Councils all over the country, the smaller ones in particular, won't have as big a job. Some people might see that as a good thing, but I don't. Thanks.
I've not seen anything, but then to be fair, it's not something I'm looking out for. Kind of working on this one.
All right, that seems to bring us to the end of the questions. Ngā mihi to the team. I just want to signal it's my intention that we break for lunch after we finish this item. And over to Mayor Whānau, who's going to move this paper.
Kia ora koutou, very happy to move this paper. Future of water infrastructure is important to all of us. And while I acknowledge this piece of work is moving really fast and we'll have some really tough decisions to make in the future, this particular paper isn't really one of them. It is just an initial vote to keep us working on the regional model on that path, as well as investigating other options. While working with the other mayors at the AOG, it's pretty clear that there's no easy fix for our water issues, and any option we take is going to require increased investment over many years either way. But staying on the path for a regional model for now is the right thing to do. I've also heard the concerns around how it actually impacts our communities. So when we consult, we'd like to give them confidence about what that means to them, and so we'll be asking AOG to develop a consumers charter, and that speaks to one of the amendments there. A huge thank you to the regional, to our officers and the regional team. This has been quite a big piece of work to get through, and a lot of fast-moving pieces. And there's a lot more to be done, but it's necessary for us to continue in this direction for the benefit of our residents and, of course, our water infrastructure.
Mayor Whanau, did you have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Foon? Councillor McNulty, sorry. Yes, no, great. Now, I just want to quickly, because I didn't highlight it earlier, and I don't want to have the same problem we had last time, this is an amended substantive, so if anybody does have any questions about the point in red, and it's unhelpfully breaking across a page. So that has been circulated earlier, so you will have all had opportunity to see that. Just checking, does anybody have any questions about that? Councillor Pannett, sorry.
Can we talk about citizens or residents rather? I, loathe the talk about consumers.
So by leave of the, and it has been seconded, so by leave of the meeting we could change that to residents? Okay, all right, we're leaving it as it is. Councillor Pannett, you'll just have to live with that.
Funny.
I just don't understand about protecting and communicating the rights of local water users. What does that mean? I mean, surely that's automatic.
It's going to be covered in debate. Okay, so we will move on to debate. And shall I go to the seconder, Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, given 13 has a bit of my genesis in it, I'll just speak to it now and hopefully that can inform debate. So it's time to be really blunt. Setting up this water entity is about the last meaningful thing this council will ever do on water. And that is the view of both teams down the road. The Parliament's pretty much unanimous that when it comes to water, local government has failed. And because I had nothing better to do on a Saturday night, I found myself going through a 2006-07 LTP, looking at what was spent on water back when we had a different mayor and council. And in their very best year, adjusted for inflation, they were putting in $61 million a year across everything: stormwater, drinking water, sewage. In our LTP, our best year is $190 million, so we're spending 3 times more than those councils. So local government has lost the moral high ground on water. That is the reality, and that's why the rules are changing, and that's why it's being taken out of our hands. It doesn't matter who's the mayor, which councillors are around this table. I'm sure it won't stop people promising the sun in the next year's local body elections, but that's the reality. That's the rules of the game. So really all that matters now is what we do when we hand the entity over. And to me, this is where the consumer charter becomes so vital. Now, this doesn't have the genesis with me. My friend, Councillor Hayward, who's a councillor at Porirua City Council, wrote about this a little while ago, and the idea that we could have a consumer charter as something sort of evergreen that sits above the governance layer, that we can hold any new entities to account. And he's given some significant thoughts, so I just want to read a few of the principles that we might find in a consumer charter, and hopefully that will explain why it's something we should advocate for. So for instance, commitment to hire or train locals. There being a minimum amount of water you are able to access without being charged to use it. No water residents ever being denied access to water services. As a consumer, transparency over where the investment decisions are being made down to your street level. Your bill should be in plain English, and you should be able to see how you're being charged relative to others over time. Things like that, which I don't think anyone around this table would disagree with, but these are the things that we can set in place before we fundamentally hand it off. And I raised that hypothetical before of, yes, there'll be a statement of expectations, but whether that really gives councils much power over what the water entities do, given they've got very strict and stringent legislative standards that they need to meet to first, we'll see. So the rules of the game have been set for us, and if we don't like it, the government will get someone to do it for us on the 3rd of September next year. It's that clear, and the fact that they've moved to put some observation in already and made quite strong reference to water shows where they're sitting on that. So I think the consumer charter is just one of those real, tangible things we can do. It's definitely going to be the focal focal point of, for me, the rest of this work is how we look through it. I understand that Porirua, Upper Hutt and Lower Hutt will all have similar types of amendments moved over the next few days as well. So this is going to come as a really strong message from across all the councils that are looking at the regional model, that we do need to have something that sits above some kind of evergreen North Star principles that we can at least hold any entity accountable to. So that hopefully gives clarity on why there's 13 in there. I just want to thank the Mayor and staff as well for their work on putting this through, because I think it's a really clear way that we can feel good about, or as good as possible about the decision. Good.
Is there further debate? Councillor Pannett, I knew you would have you. I was looking at you.
Oh, yeah, I have some things to say. So, look, thank you to the staff. I appreciate there is a huge amount of work involved, and it is hugely complex, so I'm grateful for that. I do, however, tend to agree with Councillor Brown about the sales job that was done to us, and the report that accompanies this did look like it had a particular direction of travel, which I think is unfortunate. So I just want to start off by talking about how both Labour and National have attacked local government. Now, I am aware that we haven't always covered ourselves in glory, but nevertheless, we are a very, very important part of this country. We are an important alternative to government when you have a very conservative government, as you do now, Councillor McNulty, where you actually want a progressive force for change. When the last national government was in place, for example, we did not shy away from our abilities to affect the well-beings of our community when the last government was attacking, and we did try to meet the needs of all of our community. And I think you need to look, it is a more complex stance. Central government has not given us the funding tools. I will remind you that the Labour Party in fact failed to reverse the decision on the income-related rent when it said it would in opposition, then it failed to do so in government, and we ended up putting our housing out of the control of council. Now it's Water's turn. We just had a big fight over the airport. What do you people want to leave left with this council? A few parks and gardens and some roads, and I think this is unacceptable. It is really, really important that local government's powers are actually not just maintained but enhanced. Yes, you can put some accountability over it, but it is very, very, very important that locals continue to deliver democracy for ourselves. This is just the biggest attempt at amalgamation, again, both by National and Labour. With some of these smaller councils, if they have very, very limited control over their water infrastructure, that will really decimate them. And I think that is a great shame. It's clearly obvious that there is little involvement for the community to be allowed in these structures. Now, there is a couple of points around that. At some point, yes, these are just straight operational decisions which just need to be made. But there are some extremely political ones as well, which the broader community needs to have a say in. Whoever gets elected to these boards are likely to come from a particular class of people. They're not going to be that diverse. And the problem then becomes is who is going to challenge the conventional thinking about what needs to be done, particularly in the protection of our environment, where successive governments have failed over and over and over and over again. And, we have to do better in that space. I am also deeply concerned about the costs. There are all these promises that are being made, and yet they can't really promise people that the costs will be affordable, even though obviously the rates bill will go down, that people will be burdened with costs without any ability really to have a say about that or to protest, unless you just want people going out onto the street. The stormwater issue has been badly handled, again, both by both governments, given it's so closely related to land development. and I have asked questions, as have others. The answers haven't been compelling because they just haven't worked it out, and that should give us pause for concern. So look, as part of what I've said, I'm going to vote for a continuation of the regional process, but I'm deeply concerned. There is not enough critical thinking here and enough scrutiny over really what the government is doing, and I think we need to have some pretty robust discussions going forward. Kia ora.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yes, kia ora team, thank you for the work. Thank you for the amendment on the Consumer Charter. That's really great, I think, especially given what Councillor Pennant has just said. I kind of feel like most of our community is way back down the line, and this is a really big bus that's driving right through everything, and so those conversations with the community are really important, and how we do those in a way that helps bring our community along. I can tell you that my community is not way back, but they are deep in water meters, and this whole big shift is not really the topic of conversation. So so this is charging along. We've got a community trying to work out how all of these bits are going to work together. So I think my ask would be that we really put time, energy and effort into big conversations in a creative way, as in not just our normal, not that our engagement processes, but that really help the community understand bringing all of this together. And just regarding the guarantor position, I think it is right that we are asking questions about that, because we are seeing not failure, but we haven't been able to exercise what we wanted through our current CCO. So it is important that we keep asking what our position would be if we get into that situation again. But thank you for all the mahi, and appreciate there's a lot of it. That was a very comprehensive document in the papers. Thank you.
I'd just like to first defend myself against the compliments of Councillor Pennant. I just don't find that acceptable at all. I think that the reason I think this is really important to have a charter is that at the moment we are relying either on the board of the water entity, and goodness knows who they're going to be accountable to, and in fact that's going to be one of the biggest issues we have. As we know with Wellington Water Limited, they are not accountable seemingly to anybody. And there is a sort of vague hope put forward that the Commerce Commission will come up with such sort of onerous rules and whatnot that they'll be effectively accountable to the Commerce Commission. The Commerce Commission doesn't function like that. It's not a micromanager. They are much more likely to actually go into disclosure regulation rather than onerous hands-on regulation of this water enterprise. And I'd just like to give you a tiny little snapshot of how Wellington Airport does it, because it is kind of analogous to this, is that the airport negotiates with its airline customers around pricing and investment plans. So it's got the Air New Zealand, Qantas and any other large customers on the other side of the table. Those plans and pricing are then agreed, and then what is agreed or not agreed, as the case may be, and then what is hopefully agreed, or at least finally determined by the airport, goes off to the Commerce Commission, and the Commerce Commission opines and says, you're looking to charge too much, or you're looking to underinvest, or whatever it happens to be. So in effect, the regulation of the airport is done by both the consumer, in this case through this negotiation process, and the Commerce Commission, but primarily by the consumer. I don't know how the consumer charter will work at this instance, but I feel that it would be highly desirable if there was somebody on the other side of the table from the water enterprise, whether it's a regional one or just a Wellington-centric one, which is actually representing consumers and is able to do that sort of negotiation that the airlines do at the airport at the moment. So I hope that this doesn't end up just being some sort of fluffy enterprise whose job it is to kind of vaguely sort of put forward various ideas. I hope that it is an enterprise that actually, or is an entity that actually has some sort of countervailing power against the water entity, because it's going to be very, very hard to make this water entity accountable to anybody. So this party, whatever comes out of this consumer charter, may well end up being our version of regulation of the water enterprise. And we should not rely on the Commerce Commission to do this job for us, because they're not going to do it, because they're not set up to do it, basically. So I'm just a plug for this particular initiative, and to defend myself again. No, of course not. So thank you.
I can't help but feel, Councillor, when you say Wellington Water Limited, that you're using limited as an adjective and not a noun. Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I want to reiterate, actually, your concerns. Look, the proposition for supporting and investing in water is a really bad proposition. It's really to go to our ratepayers and say, give us millions of dollars, we want you to bury it in the ground so you can't see anything has changed. And obviously past councils haven't managed to make that argument fly and haven't invested sufficiently. Reality is now we've got no choices. We've had our chance, and the government stepped in, and now we've got this new entity that's going to take over. But I'm still, like Councillor Brown, very concerned amongst all of the stakeholders that are going to be involved in water, from the government ministries to councils, Ministry of Environment. The people who seem to have the least influences are the consumers who are going to be charged for it. And I'm equally concerned as Councillor Brown that we don't set up another cost-plus entity that may meet all of those big stakeholder requirements about supporting, best practice this and good HR and supporting, gold-plated, well, I'll say gold-plated, but, huge investment in environment. And yet we end up with an unaffordable city when the bills arrive, because this will cost more. There's no two ways around it. I also I have to say with Councillor Pannitz that the council will be, forced back to its just providing parks, gardens and some roads, and I have to say I quite look forward to that, actually, because I think we have probably strayed away from doing the basics well, and I think the public is reminding us right now that we need to focus on the basics. And but with respect to this decision, I do support it. I do think that the idea of a charter is worth exploring, if only to try and balance out and remind the governors of this new entity that there are consumers at the end of the line, that they do need good quality service, and they do need a way to influence the cost effectiveness of the new entity. And I support this, but I also look forward to getting options to make sure that we know that our residents and our businesses are going to have some form of say on the quality and the planning for our delivery of water services. Thanks.
All right, that's Me Whānau, do you wish to have a right of reply?
Good debate. The level of questioning, interrogation and debate around this table gives me confidence that we will push for the right solution for Wellington, so keep it up. And I agree we need to communicate, and how we communicate is very important. We've been let down by the current model and some external politics surrounding water, but look, let's keep pushing for the best outcomes for our Wellington residents. I note and agree with the concerns about governance and our influence over the future model. However, for today, let's vote yes for this paper.
All right, we'll go to a vote. I love the not taking things separately today as well. It's extremely enjoyable. Oh yeah, sorry, that wasn't a suggestion. Councillor Chung, your yes button. It's broken. Okay, with noting a yes from Councillor Chung. All right, thank you, councillors. We are now going to go to a lunch break. I just wanted to check in with you. Could we have a short lunch break and just sort of do about 20 minutes and sort of eat, quickly, and then because we don't have a lot more to get through. So let's do that. We'll set the timer for 20 minutes and our lunch is there. Thank you. We're going to move on to the decision register updates and upcoming reports. Andrea.
I will take the papers as read.
Question from Councillor Pannett.
Sorry, it was just a small thing. The link was broken on my papers. I don't know if it was true for everyone, but yeah, just that could be double checked. Thank you.
There are no more questions? Okay, I will move this, and Councillor O'Neill will second. Is there any debate? There appears to be none. We will go to the vote. Councillor O'Neill, did you vote? Councillor Chung's, the button's not working? And Poiwi Liz? Okay, all right, that... All right, we were just voting on the decision register. I am now going to move that we go into public excluded. Excuse me, I used to have the words and they have now gone. And Councillor Panovich will second. Is there any debate? Councillor Pannett.
Ms. Reeves, I'm just wondering, is it possible in the future, it is a question, but you know, to separate out future reports from this particular body? Because there were some things I thought needed public discussion, or at least some which I was fine with. But I'm not sure if I'm able to say which ones I thought were okay to be in public and which weren't.
I'm assuming you're talking about the LGFA?
The foundation stuff.
So because that relates solely to decisions that are coming up, and we will make all of this absolutely public once the decisions have been made, but because it referred to the election of future board members, that's why we decided to keep it in public excluded.
I get that, and that's fine. Are you able to separate out the policy stuff from the appointments in future?
Yes, we can look at that.
Okay, great. All right, we will now put Councillor Randall.
Yes, I was just wondering whether it's possible to, in the public excluded section, outline that the information will be released post the appointments.
That is noted.
Thank you.
Yep, Councillor McNulty.
Just very quickly, when we had a last time of PX, we had a bit of a debate on the new process for appointments. That process has kicked off and is working well, so I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay, I'm sure there will be a lot of public interest in that. All right, let's go to the vote about whether we go into public excluded. Councillor O'Neill? The meeting's still going, Tessa. Just checking if you're there, Liz. All right, no, we'll close the vote. All right, and then we'll just take a minute A tēnā kua mutu te hui, me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, tēnā kau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatū, koe ara e rongo, whakairia aki ki ronga, kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Thank you everybody for such a productive and good-spirited meeting. Very unified and not attracting of any attention whatsoever.